Donald Trump, free trade, labor strife. It's all making for a busy week so far in Canadian politics. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
All the news you need to know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
It is break week in Ottawa. The House of Commons is not sitting. It's the Remembrance Week break. Most MPs made it back to their ridings so they could attend local Remembrance Day ceremonies. But that doesn't mean there isn't government business to attend to or politics going on. The biggest issue looming over Ottawa these days remains the election of Donald Trump as President of the United States and what the Trudeau government is doing to prepare for that. The Prime Minister was asked about his government's preparations for Trump 2.0, especially given Trump's threat to impose tariffs and Trump's desire to renegotiate the Canada-US-Mexico free trade deal. Justin Trudeau was in New Brunswick and stressed his government dealt with the Trump administration before and is ready to do so again.
7 or 8 years ago, when President Trump first got elected, he was focused on eliminating our NAFTA agreement, ripping up the trade deal that had created incredible prosperity for Canadians and Americans and grown our economy in significant ways. We successfully sat down, renegotiated that accord to protect not just our supply managed sectors, but so many manufacturing sectors across the country. And we even responded to tariffs he brought in with a demonstration that the interdependence of our economies means there are great jobs on both sides of the border that rely on the smooth flow of goods throughout the border. That is going to continue to be the case.
But at least one premier is trying to be proactive on the trade file. Ontario Premier Doug Ford told news reporters that he thinks Canada and the United States should have their own trade deal, one that doesn't include Mexico, because Mexico has become, in his words, a backdoor for Chinese-made goods.
You look at Mexico, they're importing cheap products, undercutting our hardworking men and women, not only here, but in the U.S., from China. They're slapping a Made in Mexico sticker on and shipping it up and taking our hardworking men and women, jobs away from them, unacceptable. So we're doing, Ontario alone does $500 billion. Mexico, we do $40 billion. And guess what? They import $36.5 billion into our country. So they export 36.5 out of 40, and we export $2.5 billion. It's ridiculous. And they're undercutting the market. So what I'm proposing to the federal government, we do a bilateral trade deal with the U.S. And if Mexico wants a bilateral trade deal with Canada, God bless them. But I'm not going to be drawn down with these cheap imports taking men and women's jobs from hardworking Ontarians.
Prime Minister Trudeau was asked about Premier Ford's request for a bilateral free trade deal, a deal just between Canada and the United States. He didn't answer the question and instead said his government is already working on the issue of Chinese overcapacity.
Just about all of our partner democracies around the world have expressed varying degrees of concern about Chinese overcapacity, around unfair trade practices that the Chinese economy is inflicting on the world. And we're all working in different ways to try and prevent that. We move forward with significant tariffs on steel and aluminum to protect steel and aluminum workers in Canada from Chinese overcapacity. We're going to continue to work with partners like the United States and hopefully Mexico as well to make sure that we are united in our desire to protect good jobs that are more responsible around the environment than they are in China, more responsible around labor practices and supporting families in meaningful ways. There's lots of work to be doing, and that's, I know, a big topic of conversation that we're going to have with the new American administration in the coming months.
A new U.S. administration with Donald Trump calling the shots is not the only headache for the Trudeau Liberals these days. There's more trouble on the labor front. The Labour Minister Steve McKinnon intervened this week to end lockouts at ports in both British Columbia and Montreal. The union representing the locked out port workers in BC is planning a court challenge of that decision. This move to preempt work stoppages, be they lockouts or strikes, is concerning for people in the labor movement, worried the government is moving too fast and eroding the collective bargaining rights of workers. The labor minister doesn't see it that way.
We concluded deals with the Air Canada pilots in the grain terminals on the West Coast, and Prince Rupert just ratified. We concluded deals with the Videotron workers that had gone on for a great many months. So deals are getting reached at the bargaining table. Deals are getting reached even in the logistics and transportation sector. But no deal, according to the experts who are accompanying these parties, is possible in the short or medium term in the present circumstance. So when Canada's economy, Canadians' health is threatened, any responsible government has to step in.
That's not the only file on the Labour Minister's desk. There's also Canada Post. The union, CUPW, issued a 72-hour strike notice for this Friday. Canada Post then issued a lockout notice for this Friday for 8 o'clock Eastern Time. 6 weeks before Christmas, here again is the Labour Minister.
Well, we are hoping to achieve a deal at the table. The issues at hand in the Canada Post negotiations are substantial. They're significant. There's a lot of work to do. And I know the parties are negotiating today. We will make every effort possible to keep them at the table and keep them talking. And we hope to achieve a negotiated settlement there.
This is another chance for the NDP to flex. The federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was walking a picket line this week on the West Coast, vowing to always be on the side of workers and against the big bosses.
Friends, we are here in Burnaby, another day, another picket line, because we're here to show up for workers who've been locked out. These are workers at Cal Tire. What happened is they were offered a contract that split up the workers, created two tiers. And the workers said, no, we're not going to let our workers get divided that way. And so I'm here to support them, to have their back, because if there is ever a fight and you got big bosses on one side and workers on the other, I'm always going to take the side of the working people, always.
Also on the political agenda today in Ottawa, it's the finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, meeting the press gallery in about an hour from now to update Canadians on Canada-U.S. relations. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
There is no question Rob won't get answered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues
On News Radio.
The latest Conference of the Parties is underway, also known as COP. It's the most important climate-focused conference in the world. This is COP29. Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault is there representing the government of Canada. So what is the talk at COP? Julia Levin is Associate Director at Environmental Defense. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
I must begin by asking you, because it has been making news headlines, the decision to have Azerbaijan host COP29 because it has been described as a petro-state. What do you think about that decision?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that the last three COPs have been hosted by countries who are so heavily dependent on the oil and gas industry. Of course, we know that oil, gas, and coal are the leading cause of the climate crisis, so there's obviously conflict of interest. And we saw that with a little bit of a scandal when it turned out some of the Azerbaijani COP29 officials were actually trying to make oil deals, and that's why we need clear conflict of interest resolutions. Of course, even if Canada were to host a COP, some of the same criticisms could be lobbied our way as well. And we know that when some of our, especially provincial leaders, showed up at COP28, it was also to make oil deals. So there's kind of a hypocrisy writ large, and we have to start ensuring that climate negotiations have no place, that oil and gas deals have no place at climate negotiations.
Okay. What do you think about the United States and China not attending this conference?
China has sent one of their most important climate advisors to the conference. So there is an important Chinese presence. Of course, every country sends their negotiators who actually do the hard negotiation work. Obviously, it was a complicated year for the United States with the elections that happened, but it is still Biden's negotiating team on the ground at COP29. So this is an important chance for his administration to lock in a little bit more of their climate legacy before the change in power next year.
Okay, so what is being negotiated? The focus seems to be on climate finance for the developing world. What can you tell us about that?
Exactly. That is really the key issue at COP this year. And so when countries sign the Paris Agreement, they really agree to center fairness in how we collectively tackle the climate crisis. So a big part of that comes down to wealthy countries like Canada needing to provide the financial support to countries in the global south, both so that they can take climate action, they can transition off of fossil fuels, but also so they can respond to the climate disasters they're experiencing. We know countries in the global south are by far the least responsible, but the most impacted by the climate crisis. And we know that that wealthy countries like Canada gained some of that wealth through exploiting the fossil fuels that are fueling the climate crisis. So countries like Canada have a debt to pay, and negotiations at COP29 are trying to land a new target. Back in 2009, there was the first finance target, which was $100 billion a year from wealthy countries to global south countries. We know the amount owed is actually in the trillions, so we're expecting pretty fierce negotiations over the next week and a half.
What has Canada committed to do at this conference?
So Canada, the government of Canada has acknowledged the need for Canada and other countries to really step up and close that financing gap. Canada has been a broker in previous climate finance talks. So we really want to see Canada set a high bar for what that new target should be. The other really important element of COP29 this year is the new round of national climate commitments. So every 5 years under the Paris Agreement, countries have promised to share more ambitious climate plans, and the next deadline is February 2025. Some countries are actually bringing their national climate plans to COP. We saw yesterday the United Kingdom deliver an extremely ambitious climate plan. So we hope that Canada takes inspiration from the strong climate plans being developed and really lands a robust, way scaled up climate plan before the February deadline.
Okay. In his first term, U.S. President Donald Trump pulled the United States from the Paris Agreement. And then with the election of Joe Biden, the United States signed back on to the Paris Agreement in 2021. What do you expect Donald Trump to do in a second term?
So Donald Trump has threatened to withdraw once again from the Paris Agreement. That has, cast a shadow over negotiations this year, even though there's Biden's team still there. But of course, the United States is a really important global player at these talks. It is also true that the United States has actually not been one of the more ambitious players, especially on finance. They have often acted as a blocker rather than setting a bar for ambition. So their presence hasn't always been positive, but of course, they're the world's largest polluter. Their presence matters. I will say there's a bit of gloom with this upcoming Trump presidency, but I will say that what happened last time that Trump withdrew is that the rest of the world still rallied around the Paris Agreement, and they still committed to climate action. They did not follow Trump's lead. The Paris Agreement was designed in such a way that it doesn't hinge on one country. And here we are 8 years later, and climate action has become the foundation of common sense policy around the world. We know that clean energy is not just important to tackle climate action. We know that it's driving economic growth, since renewable energy outcompetes fossil fuels, and it's driving job growth around the world. So if the United States wants to seed the 21st century clean energy race, other countries will be willing to step in and take those opportunities, and Canada should be one of those countries as well.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. Good to hear from you today, Julia.
Thanks so much for having me.
Bye-bye. Julia Levin from Environmental Defense. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow on News Radio.
You have questions
Now You Know with Rob Snow has the answers.
on News Radio.
Well, a hot issue right now in Ottawa, certainly in the United States after Trump's win, and even in some provincial capitals like Quebec City, is immigration. Trump is, of course, threatening mass deportations. Quebec is worried about a repeat of 2016, 2017, and border crossings at places like Roxham Road. Meantime, you have the immigration department scaling back intake of various streams of immigration. In fact, just recently, it announced travelers visiting Canada will no longer be automatically granted a 10-year multiple entry visa. Mark Miller is the immigration minister. He made a speech at the Vancouver Board of Trade. He's taking some reporters' questions right now. So let's listen in here.
For the longest time, the temporary foreign worker program has been a source of cheaper labor for many employers, that businesses are warning on the consequences of Ottawa's tougher policies to hire a TFW. Now, Minister, if both the temporary foreign workers and employers are not happy, why does Canada still keep the temporary foreign worker program?
You're talking about a low-wage stream that is only a very small portion of temporary residents in Canada. And maybe it is the case that employers need to pay their employees more, and we need to address what is in this area sometimes a very disproportionate relationship between employers and employees. I'm not going to say that every employer mistreats their employee. Far from that. I think if there's any indication from the screenings that we do is that the vast majority of employers are responsible, but there are challenges in the system. There are exploitative relationships that exist, and we need to crack down on them. That includes a proper wage. Clearly, in some of the low-wage categories, whether it's people working in farms, whether it's people working in food processing, we've seen an exponential rise in those categories in the last few years, and those need to be addressed, I think, in the proper fashion, reducing the volume, but also making sure that we are not cutting off an area of industry in agriculture that in this era of food inflation is very important to the food sovereignty of Canada. So the answers aren't simple. It starts with making sure that everyone is treated with dignity as they work in Canada, regardless of whether they are temporary or a Canadian citizen. But it goes through making sure that the federal government is cracking down on bad behavior, making sure that employees in some circumstances may have more open permits than perhaps the conditions that they face currently, whether it's regional permits or sectoral
Mark
permits.
Miller.
It's something we're looking at.
He's the immigration minister taking some reporters' questions in Vancouver right now. He made a speech to the Vancouver Board of Trade and about the government's immigration plans and taking reporters' questions right now. I'm Rob Snow. Newsday panel is just ahead. Lots to talk about with our panelists here on News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio. The Newsday panel.
And the gang's all here. Talk about some of the big events that are happening in our political world. Chris Day, President Winston Wilmot, welcome back.
Pleasure to be back. Thank you.
And Neil Brody, longtime conservative strategist. How are you, Neil?
I'm great, Rob. Good afternoon, Chris.
Yeah,
Hello.
great to hear from both of you today. I would like to start with what you think about what you've heard so far from various members of the Trudeau government, the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, for example, since the election of Donald Trump. The main talking point to me seems to be we've dealt with Team Trump before, and we can do it again. What do you think, Neil?
Listen, I first and foremost, I don't think the government can say anything else other than that.
Okay.
A bag of Lego has been scattered across the floor of the Canadian-U.S. government relations arena, and Canada is walking across that barefoot. They have to pick and choose their steps very carefully so they don't get a piece of Lego stuck in the bottom of their foot. Mr. Trump is still forming his cabinet, although it sounds like he's announced more than half a dozen people to his cabinet. He still has, whatever it is, 3 months till he's actually sworn in. Canada can't do or say anything in this period to overly alarm or have the eye of the United States land on Canada in any negative way. So being kind of vanilla statements going out there, semi-supportive, semi-innocuous, I think is their best bet for now until they see what the United States is going to be asking of Canada. It's nice to see that the government's convened a cabinet committee on U.S. relations with 11 ministers, but really and truly all of this relationship will be managed by 2 or 3 people, the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, and a couple of senior bureaucrats.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Neil in that I don't think you can say anything but what they've been saying, because that's really their only card to play at this point. But it does belie the history, and it belies the hostility that has existed between, and quite personal hostility that has existed between Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Trump. It also belies, I think, that Mr. Trudeau has actually eliminated or by happenstance eliminated half of the senior cabinet ministers that were there the first time around. Most of the senior leaders that were there in Trump 1 are no longer there. And I think that's potentially problematic. I do expect that the heavy lifting on this will be done by the Deputy Prime Minister, and that I don't think that Mr. Trudeau has a lot of personal cards to play with Mr. Trump. So I think the Deputy Prime Minister will be convening her cabinet colleagues and relying very, very heavily on others in civil society and other levels of government to make this all work.
Okay. Well, let's talk about another angle here, and I'll ask you how helpful Doug Ford is being right now. We know that one of the big issues is tariffs, trade. There's going to be a review of USMCA in 2026. Trump would like a renegotiation of USMCA, the U.S.-Mexico free trade deal. I'm just wondering how helpful comments like this from Ontario Premier Doug Ford really are when he said, look, we don't want Mexico to be part of the next free trade deal. There should be a bilateral deal because Mexico is a portal for made in China goods. China is importing things through Mexico through the back door. Let's listen to that Doug Ford clip again, David. Go ahead.
You look at Mexico, they're importing cheap products, undercutting our hardworking men and women, not only here, but in the U.S., from China. They're slapping a Made in Mexico sticker on and shipping it up and taking our hardworking men and women jobs away from them. Unacceptable. So we're doing, Ontario alone does $500 billion. Mexico, we do $40 billion. And guess what? They import $36.5 billion into our country. So they export 36.5 out of 40, and we export $2.5 billion. It's ridiculous. And they're undercutting the market. So what I'm proposing to the federal government, we do a bilateral trade deal with the U.S. And if Mexico wants a bilateral trade deal with Canada, God bless them. But I'm not going to be drawn down with these cheap imports taking men and women's jobs from hardworking Ontarians.
Okay. How helpful is that to at this point in time to have a premier kind of going solo like that? What do you think, Neil?
Well, two things. Mr. Trudeau would be wise, or Ms. Freeland would be wise to develop a better relationship with Mr. Ford. I know they had a pretty good relationship during COVID. Resurrecting that and using Ford as a conduit to the to the Trump administration might be helpful, because it sounds like Mr. Ford is using the exact same rhetoric that Mr. Trump used in the last year and a half to win the White House. Protect U.S. jobs, tariffs, bring jobs back home. It was all Mr. Trump's. Those are the same things in Mr. Trump's language. The second thing is, Mr. Ford, Ontarians like to make fun of the Ford family, but they've run a rather large, rather integrated business as a family for many, many years, Deco labeling. And this sounds like a reasonable business position to begin with for Mr. Ford. If you've ever done any business, the first offer, you never land on the first offer. You go back and forth and find some place in the middle. And that's a method that Mr. Trump has used in the past. And Mr. Ford is just putting out the first marker. Hey, if we're going to make a trade deal in North America, it's got to be Canada first. And, things may be given and taken as the negotiations go along, but he's staked out his first position, and it gives people a place to begin discussions, as opposed to a position that weakens Ontario's position.
Your thoughts, Chris?
I completely agree, and on that front, first salvo in a very, very long negotiation process, and one that if Mr. Ford hopes to be part of, he needs to be around for. So as someone who is looking at an election and within a year or two, he is probably saying the things he's saying with the end goal of being reelected and being around to be part of these negotiations. And to Neil's point, I do think that it's a very helpful starting position in some cases for both the Trudeau government and the Trump administration to have a Canadian provincial premier on making statements like that as they go into port security and integrated supply chain discussions with Mexico.
Be right back with our news panelists. We're going to talk about climate policy when we come back. Some interesting comments from Mr. Guilbeault in light of Trump's win. Mr. Guilbeault, of course, Stephen Guilbeault, the environment minister. No change, of course, on climate policy in Canada, despite the Trump victory in the United States. We'll talk about the wisdom of that when we return. Newsday panel on News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now you know with Rob Snow.
Returns on News Radio.
It's our Newsday panel today. Chris Day, President Winston Wilmot, Neil Brody, spent some time in the Harper PMO, longtime conservative strategist. Let's talk about Mr. Guilbeault. Mr. Guilbeault is in his natural habitat. I don't mean Azerbaijan, the petrostate, but rather an international climate conference, which just happens to be held this year in Azerbaijan. But that's where he is as part of the negotiating team for Canada for COP29. And look, he's made it pretty clear that despite Trump's win in the United States election, there will be no change in Canada's climate policy because of Trump's victory. No rethinking the carbon tax or the emissions cap or the EV sales mandate. There's actually quite a quote from Mr. Guilbeault speaking to a journalist from Politico from COP29. Quote, I'm obviously not denying the fact that Canada is a large emitter. I mean, we're the fourth largest oil and gas producer. That's just a fact. But the fact is also that for the first time now in Canada's history, we are putting in place an unprecedented amount of effort, energy, regulations, investment to bend the curve and to work so that Canada can be more and more part of the solution and less part of the problem. So it's such typical Guilbeault. He views the fact that we're the fourth largest oil and gas producer in the world as a problem and not a benefit. Whereas I think Trump views it totally the opposite way. I just wonder the failure to recognize that maybe the world has changed here. How wise is this on climate policy? Chris?
So in a word, stupid with 5 O's, stupid. In that, this is shooting yourself in the foot before you even walk into the negotiation room on what we were just talking about. This is signaling that we're not taking seriously our economy and our energy security, nor are we looking at it from a North American perspective to put something on the table as Team Canada goes down to speak to Team Trump. It is stupid, but not surprising that Minister Guilbeault and former Minister Morneau are not on the same page on these things. But that speaks to exactly what I was talking about earlier, right? Like, Minister Morneau was there in term one. Mr. Guilbeault was a climate activist who was probably just recently getting arrested. So, we have to ditch the activism and really bring in pragmatism. And I wonder how long of a shelf life this quote is going to have from Mr. Guilbeault before he's forced to have a different quote.
That's such a great line. That's such a great line. Activism, pragmatism. I might steal that in the future, Christy. I'll try to give you credit. Okay. Neil, your thoughts, please, Neil.
Well, of course, everything Chris said is bang on. Mr. Guilbeault, he can't really say anything else, and the government will have a hard time saying anything else along the lines of climate than what we heard. This government is heavily invested in quote-unquote climate action, both literally and figuratively. At least 50 billion tax dollars have been committed to the climate industry. Political offices in Ottawa are staffed by ENGO former staffers. Senior ranks of the public service have been turned into, eco-warriors. Many of the non-partisan senators appointed by Justin Trudeau are social justice warriors. Some people call this the Pierre-proofing of things in Ottawa. But there's no way this government, who has gone out and given 5 or 6 speeches from the throne, each of them highlight a top 3 policy initiative during the life of that parliament. Each parliament, and all of them contain climate action in some degree or another. So if they give up that last bastion of support, they lose a couple more points in the national polling, and then it starts to look really bad. So Mr. Guilbeault can't do anything but double down on this. But I agree with Chris. This is, it's fine to say this out loud, but somebody behind the scenes, when they're talking with the United States, has to enunciate a more Trump-friendly version of our energy policy.
I would say, just hopping on that point, I suspect this will be one of those instances, which are not uncommon as far as I understand it, where Mr. Guilbeault goes into a cabinet room with a position that is then laughed out of the room and changed on him. So I suspect this may fall into that category at some point.
All right, we'll be right back with our Newsday panelists. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know on News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
Here with Chris Day, Winston Wilmot, Neil Brody, longtime conservative strategist. None of us are New Democrats, last time I checked.
Nope.
But I always think that the measure of someone in political life is what people will say about them, either after they decide to leave political life or if they pass. And BC Premier John Horgan enjoyed a lot of political success and just an outpouring yesterday at the word of his passing for people across the political spectrum. So elected 4 times as an MLA and I believe twice as a premier. What made BC Premier John Horgan a success in politics, Chris? What do you think?
I think he was able to work across party lines and get stuff done. And I think that's evident in the fact that after he was out of office as premier and diagnosed or free from a diagnosis of cancer, that a liberal prime minister made him our ambassador to Germany. And I think that is emblematic of someone who is respected across party lines. And I think some of the outrage that we've seen over a particular tweet by Mr. Poilievre is emblematic of manufactured partisan outrage by people who usually agree or usually argue that Mr. Poilievre is too partisan. It's really quite a thing.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that in a second. Just some thoughts on what made John Horgan such a he was a political success. Even in the end, very popular Premier, British Columbia. You're not usually popular at the end. You're popular at the beginning, not necessarily the end, Neil. What do you think was his secret to his success?
Well, I think he brought an awful lot of common sense to the role. I always like to use the analogy that politicians should be like the referees and umpires in sports games. You shouldn't remember if they played a particular big role in the outcome of the game. Nobody wants to hear about a politician on the front page of the newspaper every day. And Mr. Horgan went quietly about his business. He ran, from what it sounds like, uncontested to be leader of the NDP, which means you need a lot of broad caucus support to do that. He went from a minority parliament in his first term as premier to a majority, a huge majority in his second term. And he concentrated on the energy and natural resources sector of British Columbia. If you think of BC, it's got a lot of trees and it's got a lot of stuff buried underneath its land. There's not really
a lot of coal, a lot of gas. Yeah,
I love visiting British Columbia, but that's what it was built on. So you don't need to think up or dream up wild, crazy ideas when you're a politician, when you're a premier, prime minister. You just need to do the things that the population expects you to do, and don't break anything. And I think Mr. Horgan had that formula down pat.
Okay. That's our time. We'll have to wrap it up there for this week. Good to hear from both of you. Thank you so much.
Have a great week, everyone.
Yep, you too. That's Chris Day in Ottawa today. He's the president of Winston Wilmot. Neil Brody, I believe, also in Ottawa today, longtime Conservative strategist, former with the Harper PMO for a while there. I'm Rob Snow. Talkback is coming up at 1-833-668-2577. Our topic today is the cost of living, making ends meet. It's in the news. It's all over the news today. We're going to talk about it when we come back on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. It's 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. Today's topic is the cost of living. The cost of living. And here's a question to get the conversation going at 1-833-668-2577. What could be done to help people make ends meet? What can be done to help people make ends meet? Let's start there. We'll see where things go over the next couple of hours. What can be done to help people make ends meet? The reason we want to get back into this issue today, the cost of living, is because of a series of news stories that really highlight just how tough it is right now for Canadians trying to balance a household budget because of higher costs, higher interest rates. And we're hoping with your help that we could gather some ideas that you might have to make it easier for Canadians to get by financially. 1-833-668-2577. For example, there's a story about food bank use. It's a Toronto story, but I think it's safe to say this is not just a Toronto issue. I mean, this is a Canada-wide issue. How many news stories have we read about food bank use? But this is a report called the Toronto Foundation Report. And it says 40% of the people who live in Canada's largest city say their income isn't enough to make ends meet. Last year, it was 31% who said that. This year's 40%. Imagine that. Picture this. Okay, you're in a room with 100 people and 40 of them say, I don't make enough money to make ends meet. And this report says the average hourly wage in Toronto is $39 an hour. That's the average hourly wage in Toronto, $39 an hour. Yet 40% of the people in Toronto say can't make ends meet. And, I mean, do you really think it's any different in any other Canadian city? Halifax, Calgary, Kitchener, pick your city. And also from this report, 1 in 10 people in that city are going to a food bank every month. 1 in 10. 1 in 10. It's 300,000 people. It's up 30% in a year. 30% in a year. So that's in the news today. It's thoroughly depressing. You have a big Canadian city, the biggest Canadian city, where the average wage is $39 an hour, and yet 40% of the people there are saying, I don't make enough money to make ends meet. $39 an hour. What can be done about something like that? Because something's not right. You think of $39 an hour, 40 hours a week, you're grossing $81,000 a year if you're making that kind of money and you're working those kind of hours. And yet for a lot of people, even if they're making money like that, they're having a hard time of it. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Then there's this story. It's in the news today. Personal insolvency on the rise. Up 14% in a year. That's 35,000 people across the country who have tossed in the financial towel. Higher interest rates getting much of the blame. And it quotes an expert on this in the news story. Says half of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck. Half of Canadians living paycheck to paycheck. No savings. And there are those who are thinking, and there are experts quoted in the news story, that the situation could get worse before it gets better. Because millions of Canadian mortgage holders have yet to renew their mortgage. And they're not going to be renewing at 2% rates that people enjoyed some years ago. And that could put more people into financial distress. So back to our question of the day. What could be done to help people make ends meet? You know, if you talk to a Trudeau Liberal, they will point to all kinds of things that the federal government has been doing for many years to make life more affordable for Canadians. Okay. How many times has Mr. Trudeau said, we're working for the middle class and those working hard to join it? And they will point to any number of government programs, the Canada Child Benefit, $10 a day childcare, the rolling out of pharmacare, their dental care program, school lunch program. They'll say, look, we raise taxes on the rich and we cut them for the middle class. That's what they'll say. And then you read a news story like this. So many people, working people, making what used to be considered, I think, decent wages. And yet so many people living paycheck to paycheck and so many relying on food banks. Come on, people, what's going on here? What is going on here? And what can be done about it? You know, make everything political. But Mr. Trudeau's opponents, they certainly have their own ideas. Pierre Poilievre, for example, axe the tax, right? Axe the tax, get rid of the carbon tax. And you know that narrative well by now. Stop taxing the farmer who grows the food, the trucker who brings your food, the grocer who sells your food. That's part of his affordability pitch, right? To you. Seems to be working for him so far. Big lead in the polls. No election on the horizon, but a big lead in the polls. Mr. Singh from the New Democrats, I think he would say, you're being ripped off. You are being ripped off by big bosses, by greedy corporations, and it's time to crack down on big bosses and greedy corporations. And he'll take credit for things like pharmacare and for dental care. promising to make investments in social housing, get tough on greedy landlords, rent evictions, forgiving student loan debt, cheaper cell phone prices, all of these, going after the big grocery store companies, even maybe regulating the price of groceries. So politicians, they have their own ideas on how to make your life more affordable. For the many millions of Canadians that are saying, I am having a hard time making ends meet. But we don't interview politicians during Talkback. We interview you. We go right to you. We want to know your ideas. So you tell us, what could be done to help people make ends meet? Because a lot of people aren't. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. If you've never called before, just mention that to the call screener. We'll make your call a priority. At 833-1-833-668-2577, it's Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The topic today is the cost of living as we ask what can be done to help people make ends meet. We are asking because it's in the news today. Half of Canadians live paycheck to paycheck. 40% of the residents of Toronto say, I don't make enough money to make ends meet. In a city where the average hourly wage is $39 an hour, and where 1 in 10 still rely on food banks. We are just looking for ideas on making life more affordable. If you have some, we'd love to hear from you. 1-833-668-2577. Ned in Calgary, up first on Talkback.
Hey, how's it going?
Ned.
How are you?
I'm good, Ned. Thank you. What would you do to make life more affordable?
Well, I think, Rob, I think there's no secret here. Everything's gone super expensive since carbon tax, right?
Okay.
But I think the other side of the equation is when someone that's, in my opinion, running a country is very much like running a household, right? Either you increase the revenue stream, either you bring more money home, or you cut some expenses, right? I don't think the people that are leading this country right now are doing it either, right? I mean, the carbon tax, it is bringing revenue stream to the country as a whole, but also at the same time, where the money's coming from, they're getting it from its own people, right? I mean, we had so much resources that we could have sold to other countries to bring more revenue stream, which we're not doing. And we're taxing the crap out of everyone within the country. And in terms of expenses, I think yesterday or the day before you were talking about Canada Post, right?
Yes.
Got organization, within the countries that are, always losing money. I don't think they've ever made money, right? And you're paying these people $60, $70 an hour, to do things that could have been done with $20. Something's got to give, right? I'll give you another example, the city of Calgary golf courses, right? They've never made money, right? I don't think any one of them have. If you're paying someone, with full pension, $50 an hour to mow the lawn, I don't think the golf course is going to make money, right? And the problem is you're not, and the people, the resident of Calgary are not getting access to it. It's always booked full, things like that. In my opinion, I think.
So you think what I'm taking away from what you're offering, you think government spending is too high, and taxes are too high.
Yes.
And that if both were maybe brought under control, in your opinion, maybe affordability wouldn't be such an issue. Fair enough, Dan?
Yeah, 100%. And with the carbon taxes, that increases for the
carbon tax
for the oil price, and then everything that gets delivered to us at the grocery store, and they have to jack up the prices. And then here we are, the people that are consuming are ultimately the ones that are paying for it.
Okay,
so
I'm gonna run, Ned. Thank you for your opinion. Let's go to Andre. Is in Kitchener today. Hi, Andre. Good to hear from you again.
Well, thank you. Thanks for taking my call, Well.
What do you think could be done to help people make ends meet, Andre?
I wish you didn't make that question.
Okay.
Well, the thing is that I'm on no side, but I know one thing is that $200 that may be coming in January from Doug Ford, correct?
Yes.
I think that should be put in more wisely because we are in debt. And I know even I live $5,000 a year down in my savings because unfortunately we missed the market 6 years ago. It is what it is. Sometimes you miss the boat and you can't cry about it. You got to move on. But what I seen being blind is during COVID, I seen insurance going like so low, 0% down for 7 years, or stuff like that. Cars and everything was selling like madness, and I think that's why I see a lot of people out there that got themselves so like we live every month, we pay a credit card. That's our goal, right? So I can just imagine other people because I know when I had my house 20 years ago, the first thing I thought was my savings, and I can't do that no more. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Andre. Thank you for your call. We're just getting started here. It is Talkback. Affordability is the theme. The cost of living with news reports today. Half of Canadians living paycheck to paycheck. 40% of the people in Toronto not making enough money to make ends meet. 1 in 10 relying on food banks. What can be done to make life more affordable for Canadians? Share your ideas at 1-833-668-2577. It's Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The topic of the day is the cost of living. What can be done to help people make ends meet? Terry in Calgary. Hi, Terry. You're on the air. Go ahead. What's your opinion, Terry?
Hey, Rob. How's it going?
Everything's fine here, Terry. What's your opinion on?
Hi. Yeah, I'm thinking. There's no current good incentive for people to work hard, and I think it's a problem. Like we work. I'm a construction worker, 33 years old, and I'm talking with everyone, any site I go, anywhere, and nobody wants to do overtime because it's like the cost, the cost of losing your life to work more and then just being taxed more on product that you pay more taxes on. People are kind of frustrated, and there's like a big pay gap that has been created in the past several years. Where when I first started working years ago, when I was just a teenager, minimum wage was $8-9 an hour. And you could start working in construction, $18-20 an hour, picking up garbage. And then as the minimum wage kept increasing, and then certain professions had pay increase, the average construction, blue-collar worker is still higher today at $18 to $20 an hour, while minimum wage here in Alberta, if I'm not wrong, is about $15 an hour. Like the gap is smaller and smaller. And everything is getting more and more expensive. So I think there's a pay gap that needs to be kind of evened out, to bring up to the cost of life. So people have actually the will of going out and work hard and earn a big paycheck and look at the overtime and see the money coming in and see the debt going down. I'm lucky I'm in a good position and I'm making enough money to make ends meet, but with everything going up again and again everywhere, I'm seeing myself in the same purchase power than I was about 5 years ago, with much greater income coming in. But I don't see any reward.
Right. And you think there's really no incentive to work overtime because most of what you make will be taxed too much. Is that right, Terry?
It is. It is the fair belief throughout. I would say I have to work my 60, 70 hours a week in order to have enough to make ends meet, maybe being able to pile up a little bit, so then whenever there's a little bit of an emergency, I have that crash bag that I've been able to build up, but I'm always ending up to go dig in it. And whenever I'm trying to get, we're trying to hire and we're trying to get people to come and work, no, people don't want to work. People don't want to work the long hours, don't want to work the overtime, because at the end of everything, it seems like it's time loss and energy loss for a lot of folks. Me, if I just work my 40 hours, I cannot make ends meet, and it makes me panic.
Okay, all right. Okay, Terry, thank you. That's very interesting. Sue in Airdrie. Sue, hi, Sue.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm good, Sue. What's your opinion here on helping people make ends meet?
Well, I have a little bit of a different opinion, Rob. My opinion is that I think people have the whole establishment has created a bondage of debt slavery that the people are encased in. We have this slavery of debt over us, all the money system created by the central bankers. It's all when you take a real good reality look at it, you can see that it's actually set up to keep the people in debt. And they print the money, and then they give it to us, and then they charge us money on it, interest on it. And for so many generations, Rob, we have been accepting this. But people now in this generation are waking up to starting to realize, wait a minute, I'm not going to believe everything they're telling me just because they're telling me. I think it's time that we start asking questions.
Well, I'm going to believe this. A lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. A lot of people are saying, I don't make enough money to make ends meet. And a lot of people are going to food banks more than ever before. We've heard that, and I believe that. And I want to know what can be done about it after the news.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
It's in the news today. Half of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck. It's in the news today. 40% of residents in Toronto don't make enough money to make ends meet. The average hourly wage in Toronto is $39 an hour. 1 in 10 rely on food banks. We're looking for ideas today on making life more affordable. What are your ideas? 1-833-668-2577. David in Halifax. Hi, David.
I think you're talking to me.
Yes, sir.
All righty then. Okay. I wanted to say a bunch of stuff, but my point is we're over-consuming. We're spoiled, right? If we just cut down our needs, like I need to drive my car by myself because that's what makes me comfortable, right? We're over-consuming, and it keeps driving the price up. Superstore, Sobeys, and all these places are just constantly doubling the price of food, and people are just keep lining up and buying it because, somehow they're managing to pay for that, but if we just, look at the end of the Second World War in Britain. They all had to be on, scraps. What was it? Vouchers for butter or sugar or something.
Sure.
People didn't eat sugar there's actually a study I heard on this radio station. Anyway, that's my point. I'll wrap it up.
Okay. It's our lifestyle. We want too much. We want too many things. Is that what you're saying?
So if we
you know what? Maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's something to that.
Much is. If we stop buying gasoline, get on your bicycle if you can.
Okay.
Etc. Blah 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 blah. Walk if you can. Take the bus. Right. Just, trying to conserve a little bit, act like the Britons did it after World War II. After World War II was done, 5 more years at least had to go by before they had to stop, conserving really hard.
I would hate I
Anyways,
would hate to
can I
think.
just
I understand, David. I understand consumption, maybe conspicuous consumption, whatever the case might be. I would hate to think that we would expect people in Canada in the year 2024 to whatever ration butter. I'd hate to think that that's what's become of us. Mike, also in Halifax. Mike, you're on the air. What are your ideas on making life more affordable?
For me, I think the government will need to revisit the GST on what is essential these days, and maybe reduce those taxes on essential. I give you an example. I had to look into this before I get to your call. Is electricity. Why is my electricity need to be taxed if it's an essential as much as food is? Maybe they have to revisit what is in 2024 or 2025, whenever the next government comes in, what is essential these days. Is cell phone is essential, internet is essential. Maybe that could help the lower income to focus more on other things. I know it's not much, but once you add up those little dollars together, it adds up pretty good. And I think in Nova Scotia, there's an election and they're talking about reducing the HST by 1%, another said 2%, which, it adds up. So I think if the government look into the GST and be like, okay, you know what, we're in 2024, everyone needs internet to do whatever they need to do. Everyone needs that. So why do we need to tax the internet so high? Why do we need to tax
People
the
need
electricity?
heat. People need electricity, right? Why are we taxing utility bills? Okay, and is the internet a utility? Is the internet a utility now? It used to be considered kind of a luxury, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll give you an example, cell phone. If let's say the companies, they say, okay, basic cell phone usage, I'll give you 5 gig a month and 500 minutes, whatever it is. We won't tax that. But if you want something higher, like infinite internet, then we'll tax you on that. But the basic needs, I think, should not be taxed as heavily than it used to. And
I like that idea. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think the government should start looking into that and not be in 1970 where, internet was a luxury. I mean, not internet, but something else was a luxury, and we're still taxing those luxury. Anyways, that was what I had.
Good point. Thank you, Mike. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's interesting. I didn't think of that. Yeah. Taxes on utilities. There you go. Great idea. Daniel in Halifax. Hi, Daniel.
Hi there. Housing. Really, I'm 34, and if I hadn't have gotten lucky and purchased a mobile home back in 2014 for $67,000 outside of Halifax, 25 minutes outside of Halifax, I'd be screwed. To be quite honest,
you'd be on the street, kind of thing.
I'd probably be like a lot of other 34-year-olds, living with parents or having roommates or whatever, really sacrificing.
Right.
And I just to put a point on it, I turned around and was able to, I recently got married and we sold the mobile home, and I put a little bit of work into it. But it was built in 1997, a mobile home in a park with no land outside of Halifax. And I sold that for $255,000 within a month. Right. So, and that's great for me because I was able to upsize.
Sure.
And, I had to put that into my house and put some of it into investments and, be wise with that money. But
good for you.
But for other people who were not fortunate enough to have that, you can take away taxes. I listened to your last few callers. You can take away taxes here and there. You can run on we're going to take away the carbon tax. That's not going to make a dent to these people.
Going to take the tolls off the bridges between Halifax and Dartmouth or whatever.
Taking the tolls off the bridges doesn't do anything for everybody's affordability. I mean, you'll save some people who commute over every day.
So,
30 or 40
if I could just ask you a question, this mobile home that you bought, You said for
Yeah.
67,000.
Yes.
Right? How long ago did you buy that?
That was in 2014. And
Wow.
and up until
10 years ago.
20, I actually had it for sale because of a personal struggle I was going through in 2018, and we couldn't sell it to get our money back. We couldn't break even on it in 2018. So between 2018 and 2024, that
6 years.
mobile home almost 4x.
4 times. Right.
Yes.
Isn't
Now,
that something?
I do want to say one other thing, which is about the carbon tax, because I know a lot of the listeners, especially the Western listeners, call in and they're very opposed to the carbon tax. For a little background, I voted Liberal for the last 3 elections. I plan on voting Conservative this election. I'm done with the current administration. However, I think it is bogus to run the election based on the carbon tax. The mantra, and I just heard you parrot it a second ago too, about our goods, the farmers are taxed, the drivers, the transportation is taxed, and all of it trickles down into the grocery stores and into everything we consume. I'm not here to argue that. I'm here to ask, how much does it affect our consumer goods? And at the end of the day, our price in the consumer goods, because nobody has been able to produce a quality report that shows how much more I'm paying for bread because of the carbon tax. And other countries have experienced the same inflation and don't have carbon taxes. So that's my point there. I just wanted people to think about that.
Okay, we will. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for your call. Wow, did really well on a mobile home. $255,000, 25 minutes outside of Halifax. My goodness gracious. That's crazy. Be right back. More of your calls. If you're on the line, you'll get on before the top of the hour. That's my promise to you. And we do have some lines available. 1-833-668-2577. Affordability and the cost of living. Helping people save money. Helping them make ends meet. What are your ideas? Share them here on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
What can be done to help people make ends meet? Our question for the Talkback. Janice in Calgary. Thanks for calling, Janice. Hi there, Janice.
Hi there. How are you doing?
I'm good, Janice. How are you?
Okay.
That's good.
Okay. My question would be, first, what are people's priorities?
Okay. And why would you ask that?
Well, if you've heard, how many Taylor Swift concerts were sold out in Eastern Canada?
Well, in Toronto, they're all sold out.
Right.
How many concerts is she having, David? 6 concerts or something like that?
And at how much a ticket?
Out of my price range and not really my taste, so I couldn't tell you how much the tickets are. I would imagine they're hundreds of dollars each.
Right. And how many meals can you
Right.
buy for that money?
Oh, I suspect you could probably get a couple of weeks' worth of groceries out of it.
So I'm asking, what are people's priorities?
Right. Okay. Do you think people have the wrong priorities now?
Right.
You do.
But it
That
has to,
lifestyles are too extravagant? Is that what you think? Lifestyles are too extravagant?
right. Like I live next to a Habitat for Humanity, and half the people have 72-inch TVs you can see through their living room windows. They can't do. I grew up with a 26-inch TV. Now people need. No, it's. That's why I'm asking. What are people's priorities?
Right.
Are they going to eat their TV?
So when people, for example, this report that says 40% of the people in Toronto don't have enough money to make ends meet.
Right.
I don't know how many of them are going to see Taylor Swift this week in Toronto. Half of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck, and 1 in 10 are relying on food banks. Do you think that is because our tastes are too expensive? We have the wrong priorities?
Right.
Okay. All right. Janice, that's your opinion. Thank you. We'll throw it out there and see if any callers have anything to say about that. From Janice to Norma. Hi, Norma.
Hi, Rob. Thanks.
Hi, Norma.
I agree with a lot with what Janice was saying.
Really? Okay.
I think there's also a problem with, sorry, my thought.
That's okay.
With people not living within their means. So it's sort of
Okay.
something about what she was talking about, but I think they get caught up in spending more than what they have. They put a lot of credit, and then they can't pay it. They make bad decisions. I know I'm generalizing, and it doesn't appeal to, or it doesn't apply to everybody, but they make bad decisions about, say, mortgages and interest rates and that sort of thing, not seeing the long-range picture.
Okay.
I'm excited to think, or I've been hearing that the school boards are thinking of putting budgeting and money management back into the curriculum. I think that's important. I don't think the youth today has a concept, an idea of what it takes to survive in this world today. So I think that's a good.
So the idea that there could be some, government measure, or I'm sorry to interrupt, government measure, government program, or government solution to provide relief to people, because of course all the politicians are promising to make your life more affordable. It's more about taking action for yourself, more about personal responsibility. As Janice said, priorities. What are your priorities?
That's my belief, is that people need to. They think everything is going to be easy, and I know one of your callers talked about not working hard and that sort of thing. I don't know. It just seems like today they want to work less and less and make more and more money for working less. They just don't have a work ethic, and they want things handed to them on a silver platter. And I know that's not everybody, but I think there's a lot of that going on.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Norma, for sharing your opinion. I appreciate it. It's an interesting perspective that is certainly coming out as the day goes by here on Talkback. More of your calls. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Have your say. Share your opinion. Give us your ideas on making life more affordable, helping people make ends meet. It's News Radio.
Something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
We're talking about what can be done to help people make ends meet at 1-833-668-2577. Might be able to fit one or two more calls in before the top of the hour. If you don't get on the line in this hour, we'll certainly bring you back on in the second hour of Talkback. Let's go to Andrew in Halifax. What's your opinion here, Andrew, on the cost of living?
My opinion is it's not going to get better. It's only going to get much worse, and public housing is the answer. Until we actually start taking care of one another, we're not going to get anything better. Things are only going to get dramatically worse.
Okay. Why do you say that?
Well, it's just clear as day to me as I lay here in my tent. I can go and get a job today, Rob. It's so easy. Anyone can go out and get a job within 24 hours if you actually throw the effort out there. But when you work 40-plus hours and you still can't afford the cheapest rent for a bachelor apartment, working full-time, all right, after everything's said and done, I don't have the money to pay for my rent, let alone anything else on top of that. And things aren't going to get better. We got more and more people coming in, more and more demand for everything, and inflation's going up every single day. So, again, until the people start realizing that public housing is the answer, we need to have a standard for everybody. It's not going to get better. We really need to start taking care of one another, and instead of hoping that people are just going to somehow persevere and then get these lucrative jobs that are going to allow them to be able to live.
You really live in a tent right now?
Yeah, hands down. I'm in the university encampment. I've been advocating for the homeless for months now. I actually ran for mayor of Halifax and got 855 votes that said that public housing is the answer.
Wow. What are you going to do when it gets really cold?
I'm gonna suffer like I have any time that I found myself in this situation, because that's something else I'd love to hear is what does a single guy and their kids do? Because Brownie House is bragging about how, if you're a woman and children that they've got your back, but what do you do if you're a guy with children? There's so much suffrage going on in this world, and we're literally allowing it to happen, Rob, by not giving the basic needs, by not helping the single individuals out there, and just having these over-the-top high expectations that I can somehow go out, get a job, work 40-plus hours, and still not afford to live. And I don't understand how all these people, especially the ladies calling earlier, don't see this.
Okay. All the best to you. Hope we can speak again sometime. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, that's hour one of the Talkback. Very busy hour. I hope we can keep the calls coming in. More opinions, more ideas, please, on the cost of living, the affordability crisis in Canada.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Talkback, where the topic is the cost of living. What can be done to help people make ends meet? We have reports today. Half of Canadians living paycheck to paycheck. 40% of the people in Toronto don't make enough money to make ends meet. 1 in 10 relying on food banks, looking for ideas on making life more affordable. One of the prevailing themes from the first hour was don't wait for the government to help you. Take action for yourself. It's about personal responsibility. You don't need all the things you have or want. You don't have to keep up with the Joneses or run the fear of missing out. You don't need the latest stainless steel appliances or granite countertops. You don't need a TV in every room or the latest electronic devices and streaming services. You don't need to go on all those trips to Algonquin Park. You don't need a pool or a boat or an ATV or a $100,000 pickup truck to park next to your SUV, and we've done this to ourselves. That seems to be one of the themes that has emerged in hour number 1. Let's see how hour number 2 goes. Jeremy in Halifax. Hi, Jeremy.
Yeah, how you doing? I want to weigh in on exactly what you just talked about, this idea that it must be all down to poor personal decisions, because I think that's a pretty gilded, privileged position to take. I mean, I think a lot of people, myself included, have begun to struggle through no fault of our own. It's not because I've been irresponsible with my money. It's not because I don't work hard. I work 40 to 50 hours a week in a construction job. I work in the elements. I don't always get 40 to 50 hours a week because sometimes you lose because of hours or because of weather. I travel approximately 4,000 kilometers a month so I can see my kids who live 6 hours away from me. I do all the driving. I bring them back to the house that I live in. I pay my child support, and telling you right now that I'm struggling significantly more now than I was 4 years ago when I first made the move to the city, and I moved away from my kids so I could find better employment from a place in rural Nova Scotia. But this idea that most people just got to pull up their bootstraps and put their nose to the grindstone. I'm telling you, there's already a whole lot of people out there in Nova Scotia and Canada who are already doing that, who have no other choice but to struggle, because the cost of living has, as we all know, significantly increased.
Okay, so given that experience that you're living through right now, what do you think could be done about it?
Oh, that's it's a complicated question, but I think tax relief would be a good start for lower and middle income, because I think regardless, the real solution is to put more money back in people's pockets at the end of the day. If you can't find a way to reduce prices, which I don't think is a realistic thing, to regulate grocery costs, it's not going to happen. Give support to smaller independent grocers who can give a break to the consumer. And I'll give you an example. I just went to a small grocer, an independent grocer here instead of Loblaws or Sobeys. Okay, for about $80, I got 2 huge bags of produce and meat and school snacks and, vegetables, all the good stuff. I'm sure it would have cost me double what I paid had I gone to one of the major retailers. So, helping to get out, I guess, to subsidize maybe more of these independent grocers who can give good deals, because I don't understand why it costs me $2 for 4 peppers from this local grocer in Halifax, and I go to the grocery store and one of the big retailers sells it for $8. I don't understand it, right? How can somebody who has the huge buying power of Loblaws or Sobeys have a markup of 4 to 8 times what, a small independent buyer who has nowhere near the buying power? How's that possible?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, very interesting. Jeremy, thank you for your call. I'm going to fit in another call here. Let's go to Owen in Halifax. Owen, please share your ideas here and your experience, Owen.
Well, I believe, first of all, we have to eliminate the parasitic jobs involved in government.
Okay.
If everyone had one tax rate, you crunch the numbers, whatever it's going to be, but everyone is treated the same, one tax rate. How much did you make? Okay, then this is your percentage. Pay your taxes, file your form, and it's done. You've just eliminated all of your accountants, okay, and the government bureaucracy behind it. I look at the Arrive scam and the amount of money on that one that was wasted. They should be charged with treason, and that money should be given out to either food banks, okay, or the poor, and there's more going on. I totally disagree with the immigration policy that we have right now. We are bringing too many people in for an infrastructure that we cannot handle. There's billions of dollars here in Halifax that is required under the street to be able to support any growth. So it almost reminds me back in the Mussolini days in Italy. If you took a wheelbarrow to the grocery store full of money, people would steal the wheelbarrow because the money was useless.
Okay. Well, we're not there just yet, sir. We're not. But you would take a chainsaw to the size and scope of government, right?
Absolutely. And not only that, the size and scope, but the amount of political friendship and where it's going for unnecessary things.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your call. We're going to stop here, and we have 3 lines available there. So if you haven't had a chance to get in on the conversation, now would be a great time to call at 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577 as we talk today about the cost of living and trying to make ends meet. It's Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Making ends meet, the cost of living. That's the topic today. Gary is in Halifax. Thanks for waiting. Gary, you're on the air. Go ahead, Gary. What's your opinion?
Well, good afternoon, Rob. I listen to all the reports, the economic reports, and it's just crazy. So to begin with, you need $1 million or the equivalent income, potential income to buy a home. I never thought I'd see it here in Halifax, but that's where we are. And I find that after talking to a lot of my peers, we're retirees, that everybody that's in a place right now, whether you're renting or you own a home, you're stuck where you are, because if you try to even move anywhere, your rent's going to go up, or if you own a home and you sell it, you're going to be in a bind with higher rents, or maybe maybe take on a mortgage, which you wouldn't want to do when you're retired. So you're stuck where you are. And for seniors that can't afford homes, and they're in a precarious position, because with their income, a lot of seniors on the lower end of the scale, they're only making about $1,000 a month, or maybe $1,200 or $1,400 a month when you figure out the Canada pension, if they're lucky to get one. Some people didn't work and they don't have it, so they got a mean income of about $1,400. a month, and that's nowhere where you can pay rent.
Right.
And so in the past we had, and I agree with your first caller before the first break there. At 3:00, he ran for mayor, and I listened to that guy. He's well spoken. I almost voted for him, but there was one other candidate that I knew quite well, Jim Hoskins, who was a policeman here in Halifax for 30. I liked the way he was talking. I voted for him. But anyways, we need public housing, and now we need senior housing because none exists anywhere. And what happened in the past with that, there used to be senior housing strictly for seniors. But then, for whatever reason, they got melted into public housing where younger people came in. And now when people are being evicted, it includes people that are very vulnerable, and they just don't have anywhere to go. So these tiny homes, like there was one couple here that were going to be separated because only one person could to a tiny home. So they had to make accommodations for them, and they eventually found a place. But there's more and more seniors that are facing this.
Right.
So, in my opinion, unless they have public housing, they're just not going to solve anything.
Okay. All right, Gary, I appreciate your time today, Gary. Good to hear from you. Public housing, not the first to bring that up today. Sue in Calgary. Yes, time for Sue's call here. Go ahead, Sue.
Hi. I'm a first-time caller. I've listened to your show a lot, and there's a lot of good topics on it.
Thank you.
My thing for the cost of living is basically what's got to be fixed, because like these people are saying, you're working a full-time job in a minimum wage. You can barely afford to make your rent. But when you look at your utility bills and the administration fees and the taxes, especially on your home heating, it's ridiculous. It's just making that much more expensive to make it. And insurance is another thing. Danielle Smith was quoting this year that, we're going to lower insurance premiums for people who have never had an accident or have a good driving record. Well, I've had none of that. I'm driving a 19-year-old vehicle, and my insurance went up. And I asked them, the company I deal with, I said, why is it going up when it was supposed to go down? And they said, well, behind the scenes, we actually have to apply to the government to increase insurance rates, and Danielle Smith approved their increase while she's telling Albertans that they're going to lower it. The government is doing nothing to address the housing, the affordability, the health care crisis that we're in. They just keep bringing in more and charging us more. So, something's got to make a huge change because people just can't make it.
Okay. Thank you, Sue, for your opinion. Yeah, time for one more here. And some lines available there. 1-833-668-2577. Joe in Port Elgin. Joe, you're on the air. Weigh in here, Joe. What's your opinion?
Hey, Rob. My heart goes out and breaks for that guy who called in about separating with his wife and having to drive 6 hours. Once you split your assets in half, if you weren't already near the poverty line, you are definitely below the poverty line. So my advice to you, since I've already been through this 2 decades ago, if you're going to see your lifestyle split in half, so that puts you below the poverty line. Try and work out a proposal with your ex and an arbitration or a mediation. Don't go to the lawyers and give them tens of thousands of dollars that you can't afford. Work it out in some sort of manner or fashion where you don't end up below the poverty line, because it's really sad. And I hate to hear stories like that, and it breaks my heart. This guy is like salt of the earth, and I'm sure he just means well. It's just not working out for him in today's Trudeau climate and economy. It's not working out. So my advice to everybody is try and work it out. Take the emotion out of the equation and use logic going forward so that you don't end up below the poverty line where if you're already close to it. Because when you split your assets in half, you're done.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. You know this point of the end of relationships, marital breakdown, whatever the case might be. I have taken calls from people Usually when we've done shows about generational fairness, did the older generation have it better than the younger generation? I have taken calls, particularly from women, who have said, I've gotten divorced and it's like it's starting all over again. I am starting all over again. And it is very, very difficult. It's not to be discounted. 1-833-668-2577. Cost of living, trying to make ends meet. Your ideas on helping people trying to make ends meet. 1-833-668-2577. Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The cost of living's been a hot topic today. Let's take some more calls. Nick in Alberta. Hi there, Nick.
Mr. Snow, you having a good day?
I'm having a good day, Nick. Thanks for calling. What's your opinion here, Nick?
My opinion is, yes, the cost of living has gone up. Everybody's paying more for everything. But
Yeah.
I started a job here about 4 years ago. In that 4 years, I've saved up almost $20,000. I'm retiring here in 3.5 weeks, and we've got a comfortable living going. So we just made everything simple. We didn't, we go out every once in a while for dinner or whatever, but we just simplified things. We didn't, we don't need, $80,000 car or, whatever. I'm driving a car that's a 2013. But no, we just simplified things, and it made things a whole lot easier.
Okay, so again, one of the themes that seems to be emerging, Nick, from the callers is that I don't know, people's wants and needs are too extravagant. I mean, would you say that?
I dropped down in a little bit of a valley here. I lost you there for a minute. What was that? Sorry.
Okay, well, I'll let you go, Nick. Yeah, simplify life. Nick says, simplify your life is what Nick says. So while Nick gets the cell phone issue sorted out, how about Robert in Calgary? Robert, are you there?
Yes. Hey, Rob. How's it going?
Hello, Robert.
Hello.
I'm fine, sir. Thank you. What's your opinion here?
Well, I'm just listening to the show, and it's a great topic. I like it. It just sounds like maybe we should have more taxes on these luxuries that people are talking about and eliminate or reduce the taxes on the necessities. Go the opposite way. And going back to some of those things those guys are saying about working harder and longer, maybe reward. I know I work long hours as well, and I get a big, my income tax at the end of the year is a bit, I get a lot back because I work so much overtime. So maybe reward those people with the, that pay into the unemployment insurance and reward them with their hours if they work more.
Okay. But, this idea of taxes on essentials, people have raised, things like utility bills. Should we have taxes on utility bills? Or even, is the internet now as important as, say, electricity or heating your home or something? Should we really have taxes on these things? The government has moved and put taxes on luxury items like, expensive cars and boats and things like this. But one of the ideas that has come up today is, why are we taxed? We don't have the GST on most grocery items, for example. Should we really have tax on your electricity bill or your natural gas bill or whatever the case might be? What do you think about an idea like that?
No, I don't think we should have to tax. I think going out for dinners, going out and like trips, all those other things, cars, and eliminate some or reduce bus passes, the groceries, things that people need. I think everyone's agreeing that it's some of these things that people are trying to get are not necessary. And if you want it, you got to pay for it.
All right, very interesting. Thank you. We're going to stop here. Okay, we're going to stop here. We will stop right here, and then we'll be in the home stretch of today's Talkback. We're talking about affordability. I mean, in the news today, half of Canadians living paycheck to paycheck, a real struggle for a lot of people to make ends meet. 40% of the people in Toronto where the average wage is $39 an hour. They're saying, I don't make enough money. I can't live on even $39 an hour. Record food bank use. What can be done about this? What are your ideas? 1-833-668-2577. Back after this.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Affordability and the cost of living, the topic today, helping people make ends meet. Given news that half of Canadians live paycheck to paycheck. That's in one news story today. Another news story today says 40% of people in Toronto are saying they don't have enough money to make ends meet. We have 1 in 10 people relying on food banks. We're looking for ideas that could make life more affordable. What are your ideas? 1-833-668-2577. Phyllis in Calgary. What do you think about making
Hi,
life
Rob.
more affordable?
How are you today?
What are your ideas?
Well,
Good, thank you.
I think, first of all, the carbon tax would provide immediate relief at the pumps, on our heating bills, and at the grocery store. And I think I really resent the people that say, like, I know there's some people that live beyond their means, but I think it's past that. Like, that might have been a couple of years ago, but it's getting harder every year. And the Trudeau government seems to be willfully blind, just like they are on the foreign interference. Like, when was the last time Trudeau or Freeland went visited a food bank and, gave out hampers? I don't know. Maybe if they did, it would just be for a quick photo op. I think it's more government overspending and overtaxing. The figure out there is it was 43% of our paychecks, go to taxes, and I think I've heard it's even gone up to 46. Like, how can people survive on half of their income? It's ridiculous. And we've got taxes on the carbon tax. Like, who does that? It's I don't know. It's ridiculous, frankly. Immigration has been a big driver of the affordability crisis. The one guy was talking about, our overspending, and what does he want us to go back to food stamps? And rationing butter and sugar and stuff like that.
It has been suggested today. Yes, it actually has been suggested today that we really need to, simplify our lifestyle, I guess.
I think the government
take the bus. You don't need take the bus.
Spending.
You don't need to drive. Ride your bicycle to work if you can ride your bicycle, or these kinds of things, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, not very practical in a lot of cases.
Okay.
Especially I'm in Calgary, and it's a big province, and people drive all over to get to their jobs, and we're not the only province like that. People drive, and that's another thing about the carbon tax. I don't think they measure it. They don't give anyone credit for doing anything good, and how do they know how much gas we put in our cars? I have two vehicles, and every time I fill one of them up, one is, and I'm paying $1.28 for gas. And, one vehicle is $80 to fill, and the other one, I think it's pretty close because it's got a similar gas tank. But,
so the carbon tax is a big thing for you. The carbon tax is a big thing for you. Okay, Phyllis, thank you. I'm going to move along here. I will bring David in, though. David, again, I guess this can be frustrating for some people because this is a theme that has kind of worked its way into the conversation here. Lifestyle, David.
Yeah.
Our needs are just too extravagant. We don't need all the stuff that we think we need. We don't really need all the things that we want. And if we just let a more, toned down lifestyle, simplified lifestyle, things would be better. What do you think of that idea, Dave?
I'm disappointed to hear that opinion is proliferating, it would seem, out there. I've heard that more today than other shows we've done on a similar topic. And I would just ask people to consider this. I mean, when I was growing up, I came from a family where my grandparents were uneducated, worked hard, blue collar, sent my parents to school. They worked hard. We had a comfortable life growing up. My brother and I were able to go to post-secondary education. The idea was you could, through hard work, achieve a higher standard of life as generations go by in this country. That's what I would consider the Canadian dream.
Right.
Now that we have entered a period for the first time, really, since the end of World War II, where the standard of living is slipping in this country, has been slipping for almost a decade now. I don't think that people are living so far beyond their means that it discounts the bigger trend and the bigger issue, which is work does not go as far as it used to. Hard work doesn't go as far as it used to. Education doesn't go as far as it used to. Work experience doesn't take you as far as it used to. There's a bigger problem there, and it's outside of just wanting something that you can't have.
Okay, very interesting. Why don't we stop here, and we'll take some more calls in the final 20 minutes of Talkback. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. If you're on the line, you'll get on the air before the top of the hour. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Trying to make ends meet, dealing with the high cost of living. That's been our topic for the Talkback today. Debbie in Calgary. Hi, Debbie. What are your thoughts on the topic,
Rob.
Debbie?
How
Hi.
are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Okay, so I'm coming at this from a senior's perspective. I recently retired, so I'm now on a fixed income. Over the last 4 years, I live in a small 1,100 square foot duplex, and my utilities have gone up $400 a month in 4 years. Or sorry, $200 a month in 4 years.
Okay.
And my taxes had gone up about $40 a month. And I'm sure being in Calgary with our nice big water main break this summer, my taxes are going to go up again to pay for the repairs on that. And I do get that the carbon tax, absolutely, it doesn't probably impact me as much because I'm not going to the gas station as often anymore. But the utilities, and like that other person said, you know, there are things out there that are now staples like internet and whatnot that we need. And to have taxes on those things. And the other thing, I'm not working anymore, but if they could reduce the income tax percentage that comes off of everybody's paycheck at the mid to lower income, that's an immediate influx of cash in somebody's pocket as well. Possibly, you know, come income tax filing, you may get a little more back.
Right.
So taxes for sure, you know,
Taxes.
on so many taxes on so many things. Overtaxed.
Okay. Overtaxed. Okay. Debbie, I thank you for your call. I think we have Nick again. Is Nick still there?
I'm back.
Yeah, you're a patient man, Nick. Thank you. So you said, well, look, we simplified our life. You kind of you downsized your life. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, my wife spends, I would say hours, but she spends time on the computer looking for deals on groceries, whatever. We needed a new laptop. Well, she found a laptop. Wasn't an expensive one, but we bought a new laptop. Also, we use coupons.
Okay.
We go out for dinner, two for one deals. Instead of spending $40, we spend $20.
Right. So you're real bargain hunters then, Nick.
Well, we weren't at one time, but like I said, we decided we were living paycheck to paycheck and barely scraping by. We actually had to borrow money at times just to pay whatever. Now, like I said, I started a new job 4 years ago. I'm due to retire here in 3 weeks. We've got a nice little nest egg we got saved up, all because we got smart. We simplified things. We use coupons when we can, and smart. Shopping smart. Don't go out and buy the $3 can of soup. Spend $1.50 on that can of soup.
Yeah, if you could find the $1.50 can of soup, I guess, Nick, that's becoming a challenge for people these days. But you're saying it's out there. Okay, thank you, Nick. Thank you. I got you. Nick says you gotta shop smarter, according to Nick. Okay, Sarah is in Cambridge. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, how are you, Rob?
I'm good, Sarah. Thank you. What's your opinion here?
So I think, I honestly feel that the government is definitely taking too much from us and not giving us any return on our money. Last time I went to the hospital, I waited 14 hours in the emergency. The housing market, of course, has become a little bit insane. Now, flip side to that is people, are a little bit more, expect a little bit more in a house nowadays, so everyone has to have an ensuite, everyone has to have a walk-in closet, which makes sense. Yes, of course, more bathrooms in the house is going to cost more, but on the other side, we also have two people working now, as for before there was only one person working. So there's a lot to balance that out. On the other hand, I feel that the housing market through COVID, of course, has gone through the roof. But I feel that in Ontario, anyways, that they've taken away a lot of trailer parks. There used to be a lot of trailer parks where people with lower income can kind of live in. In Mississauga, Ontario, I think there were 5 or 6 of them. Now find me a trailer park in Mississauga, Ontario. There is no such things. So, we've gotten into these tiny homes and stuff like that. Maybe we could build tiny home communities, kind of like a trailer park, so that these tiny homes can go into areas and people can live in communities like that at a lower price point.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard the call in the first hour, Sarah. We took a call from a guy who 10 years ago bought a mobile home 25 minutes outside of Halifax. He bought it for $67,000.
Yes.
Okay, 10 years ago. And he just sold it, he said, 10 years later, for $255,000.
Well, yes, but for $255,000, you can get a house to live in. Right
I
now,
but
it's $1.5 million if you want a little tiny war bungalow home. So, inflation does go up. You look back at my parents' first home, it was $35,000. Of course, the house now is worth a lot more 40 years later. It's no longer $35,000 for an actual home on an actual piece of land. But I think, our government is definitely indulging too much in our spendings, and I'm not sure what they're doing with it, but they're definitely taking our taxes and not putting them where they're supposed to be in the hospitals and the schools, all that sort of thing. But I honestly think that a tiny home community or a trailer park community maybe needs to come back, because people are living on the streets. They can't afford $1.5 million home or $1 million home in the GTA.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. I have to stop here. Yeah, and then we'll fit in maybe 1, maybe 2 more calls before the top of the hour, and that'll be it for Talkback Midweek Edition. Very, very busy today. Lots of opinions, of course. The cost of living is touching everyone, right? It's a struggle out there for a lot of people. Share your thoughts. 1-833-668-2577. Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Well, it's been a very busy couple of hours. I really appreciate all your calls. I always do. We've been talking about news reports today. Half of Canadians living paycheck to paycheck. 40% of residents of Canada's largest city in Toronto not making enough money to make ends meet. 1 in 10 relying on food banks. Affordability, ideas about affordability, what could make life more affordable. Mike in Kitchener, thanks for waiting. Mike, you're on the air. Go ahead. What's your opinion?
Hi, Rob. One of the things I've noticed here, and I'm concerned about, is my elderly senior relatives.
Okay.
Today we've talked about cutting GST, HST, carbon taxes, and income taxes. However, I can give you an example of an elderly aunt here. She's widowed. She's 86 years old. She makes $47,000 a year. Her combined federal and provincial taxes, when she gets all her credits back, is around $4,000. The biggest expense in her life right now is the property taxes on the home she's owned with my former uncle and who passed. And between fees, services, and stuff like that, that's close to $7,200 a year in the GTA.
Wow. Holy smokes.
We talked about all the federal and provincial things, but I think these city and municipal governments need to smarten up too, because basically in the one town she lives in, they raised the taxes by 20% over 3 years. And do you think a senior can absorb that on a fixed income? No.
Of course not, right? Yeah.
So when you talk about your bike lanes and spending $60 million on that, when you talk about your pet project city councilor, I think they need to be reined in, Rob, because they're not right now. And they just think, oh, I'm going to raise it up because people need services. Well, if you tax them to death at the municipal level, they're not even going to be able to afford their homes. And that's my thoughts.
All right. Very good thoughts. Very good thoughts. Yeah, the municipal level of government should not be forgotten, especially it's budget season, of course, for so many municipalities now, draft budgets, and there'll be some heated council meetings all across the country, I'm sure. And a warning, this inflationary environment, it's a killer for incumbent governments. What has happened with inflation and the cost of living is sending governments to defeat in elections everywhere. David Coletto, the CEO of Abacus Data, has a term for this. He calls it inflationitis, and pointed out in a recent Substack posting how inflation is just taking down one government after another. Perhaps Donald Trump's win in the United States is just the latest indication of that. Americans booted the Democrats out of the White House, the Senate, and it looks like the House now too, in part because of inflation. And a lot of people think Justin Trudeau's probably next in line, and the polls would certainly suggest that. Inflation. It's just hard to say to people, if you're in government, if you're an elected leader, it's hard to say to people who are really struggling. And a lot of people, millions of Canadians are really struggling. Oh, we understand you're struggling, but it's really not that bad. And we have all kinds of programs that are here to help you make ends meet. I think it's becoming increasingly clear as the months go on in 2024 that voters are not really buying that, and slick politicians are catching on to that. That's why you see politicians right now like Doug Ford in Ontario promising people what? Cold hard cash. $200 for every member of your family. $200. Go spend it on whatever you want to spend it on. Hashtag Ford Nation. And you see Tim Houston in Nova Scotia doing similar things, promising to save people money. I'll take the tolls off the bridges between Halifax and Dartmouth and eliminate parking fees in hospitals because they've caught on. People need relief. The Liberals have yet to figure that out, I'm afraid. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. It's News Radio.